Singing together for years, but not in this building. So anyway, how many of you remember the Seekers? That was the Seekers. Tremendous pop group, folk group from the early 60s, and we all knew their songs. And boy, we're just plumb pleased to see such a nice turnout here today. Usually Black History Month in Glendora is one of the biggest crowds we have during the year. And if you notice on the top of your brochure, this is a nice job, Anthony, really swift here. Our 21st year of celebrating Black History Month in this congregation in one way or another. And you know why we do Black History? It's to make white people feel guilty, right? This is what everybody thinks out there, but nay, that is not so. I'll talk about that a little bit. But we're going to welcome some people here, and every year we forget to do this, but we have two members of the GCI board here today. I don't know if they're checking up on us or they're just to have a good time. One of them is Franklin Geist back there on the church board for a long time. And in front, our very good friend, Mr. Curtis May, who is known as this congregation. And I can't help but mention the McDuffies, who came all the way from, where was it again? Palmdale. And half of Bakersfield usually comes when they show up. So that's really nice. And I know I have a lot of good. Anybody here for the first time today? Anybody here for the first time? All right, that's good. Well, welcome. I find the food will be worth it. We really want to thank Pastor Bernie Dizon for carrying on this grand tradition. We thank you very much that we can keep doing this. A lot of loose moving parts when you do something like this. We have our guest speaker here, Mr. and Mrs. Steve Brooks, and I'm glad he showed up. It's always nice. So you can read about him on the inside. He's got a lot of good background, and of course his wife as well is no stranger to this subject of reconciliation. So good to see you all. My, you look like a great crowd. This is really good. I could go on like this, but I better talk about what I'm supposed to do to get you introduced. You know, why do we do this? Why do we focus on this particular slice of Black history? It's very important. And when you look at our church, when the Quaker pastor came for our first service here, back in 2001. And he said, what is the thing I'm going to notice the most? And I said, what you're going to notice the most is our racial diversity. He said, oh, okay, I didn't think it made it. But then when he walked in, and it hit him, and he saw us all, we do this every week, we don't think there's anything strange about it. But I went to a Glendora meeting here, where the pastors of the town were lamenting the fact that so many of their congregations are still trapped in the past and looking inward. And I said, well, they could always sing "We Shall Overcome," that might help the cause a little bit. But as it turns out, he walked in and he said, wow, you were right. I have never seen such a diverse, you talk about a healthy congregation, he said. I said, well, you don't know them as well as I do, but they're very good. The Martin Luther King years show that the church, the black church in particular, was in the forefront of this movement that changed the country. Being a racially diverse church, can you imagine the tensions that would have caused if segregation had not been done away with in the 60s? Well, of course we know there's discrimination, we know there's all these ugly things, but Trudy here and Darrell, they'll remember a time when our church had segregated seating. Some of you will remember that. People don't know that's a little bit of our history that we're not too proud of, but somehow God's Spirit overcame these things, and these two wonderful people are still here. So imagine if this had not been taken care of in 1964-65, it would have really hampered the growth of this church. So that's a good reason to connect us and tie us in with what was going on. Did you notice back in 1979, going back a bit, when the state of California attacked our property, that we began to adopt the tactics of sit-ins and preach-ins and protesting down by City Hall. We borrowed the tactics of the 1960s. But even more so, it took a great coming together to bring about the changes that we'll point out here in a little bit. It took a coming together of all the people groups. I don't know what, is this the time where we show the slide of the two guys? Have a look here. It took allies, as Curtis and all of us in reconciliation know. One of the key principles is ally building. There's a picture of two guys who were instrumental in the Freedom Riders, who were, okay, he's going to get it to you later. My personal connection begins in September '62 when I was a young freshman enrolling in university. I was back in Eastern Canada, way back there, and of Green Gables country. My main worries in September when I signed up was, would I have my galoshes ready for snow and rain back in Eastern Canada? But a young man named James Meredith was enrolling the very same month at the University of Mississippi. And it took 2,000 troops to settle. And there they are. There are two heroes of the movement. This man is Elwood King. He's a Methodist minister. And this guy on the right is a Jewish atheist. So it takes all kinds, you see. It takes all kinds to start a movement. But they were instrumental in the Freedom Riders. The Freedom Riders would go down from the north and try to enroll people and get them voting and all these things. And James Meredith took 2,000 troops to put down the riot. And I'm worried about rain and snow on the way to college. And I thought, what in the world is going on? And I had an Anglican landlady who kept saying, this is not right. We've got to stop these things. And she sort of got me stirred up and sort of got me going. When I went to grad school in 1990 at the University of Toronto, we were doing American history, American social history, I had a Jewish professor from New York. And he said, I want to let you all know that I'm behind the civil rights movement. My son's name is Martin Luther King Berman. Good Jewish name. Martin Luther King Berman. So when it came to time to cover the civil rights period, all the brilliant 25-year-olds in the class, how well I remember, they all said, oh, no, I don't want to get, I don't feel, let Neil do it. He's the oldest guy here, He remembers all of this stuff. I said, okay, I don't mind doing this at all. So that's part of why I found myself doing this. And you're going to see this coming together, ally building theme as we go through the first half of church. But just think about it, how our church would never have developed or could have developed if it hadn't been for the victories won in the King years, and I think that's our establishing slide, Parting the Waters. It's on the cover of your bulletin. But I've talked enough. One of the great things that made the Civil Rights Movement so memorable was the fact that they had good music. You all remember this one we did, We Shall Not Be Moved. They also had songs about the country and the nation, and songs about heroes proved in liberating strife. That's a nice phrase. That should be a song. It is. We talk about protest marching and boycotts, and very prevalent today. And one big difference in the 60s was, in the early 60s, was nonviolence was the theme. And we will show you a slide, hopefully, that will make that clear. Someone sent it to me on Facebook. But if it's not there, I can talk anyway. Slide says, he looted nothing, he attacked no one, he changed the world. Picture of Martin Luther King. I can imitate that picture. You know, it wasn't just one racial group that were victimized by segregation. Daniel Zamorano came back from Germany with his uniform on and couldn't eat at a cafe in Texas. Different world, right? Different world. Azusa had a play back on Martin Luther King weekend about the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and they were all reading different portions from that famous book To Kill a Mockingbird. And the little girl who played Scout, she was 12 years old, they asked her, what did you learn? They asked everyone, what did you learn during shoot? I said, this is all so weird. It's like she just couldn't believe it. Yeah, that's it. That's someone on Facebook sent me that. Looted nothing, burned nothing, attacked no one, changed the world. And that's the power of the gospel. When it's completely understood, it has to spill out from the church into the streets. Someone talked about the civil rights protesters and all of the marchers were practicing the theology of the streets. They were really bringing it home to people. There weren't an awful lot of them leading all of this, but those who did really were committed to pay the final price. Most of you remember Rosa Parks. She started the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955. Few people realize that was planned, that the NAACP, that's a good question for a test, isn't it? NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which Trudy is still, I believe, part of. They planned that, and they organized it, that she would finally take a stand. And this started the boycott. And it turned out that the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church was Martin Luther King. So it was a very interesting conjunction. And after the bus boycott, it took about a whole year, but finally the civil rights marchers won out. But it's interesting to see how Dr. King handled this when he announced the victory. And our good friend Curtis May will read his words on that occasion.
This is not a victory for Black America. This is a victory for all America. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We must come to see that the end that we seek in our society is that society must be peace with itself, at peace. A society can live with its conscience. And that will be the day, not of the white man, not of the black man, but as man, as man. Any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. For example, the Jews in Hitler's war, if you got a Jew and kept him, they found out they would kill you. They would kill the Jew. They hated them that much. We will reach the goal of freedom in this country because the goal of America is freedom. Abuse and scorn, though they may be, our destiny is with God's destiny. Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the pen of Jefferson etched those wonderful words, the Declaration of Independence, we were here. If the inexplicable cruelty of slavery could not stop us, nothing will stop us. Nothing will stop us. They will fail. We have discovered that we can stick together for a common cause. We have discovered a new and powerful weapon: non-violence resistance.
Oh, isn't that a refreshing word? Non-violence. Isn't that a nice word for the times? These things never go old, they never get old. In Birmingham, there was a very tall minister from the backwoods named Fred Shuttlesworth. Actually, Curtis met him a few years ago. And you usually see him standing alongside Dr. King in the marches, and he was continually trying to get the black community aware of the fact that they didn't have to take all of the strictures against them in the city of Birmingham. One of his quotes was, "Either segregation will kill me, or I will kill segregation. But one of us have got to go." This is Fred Shuttlesworth. Well, the last tactic they could use was to use the Sunday school and the churches to be the base for the big protest they had planned in Birmingham. Never dreaming, of course, that the police chief, Bull Connor, whose name lives in infamy, would be there with the water guns and the police dogs and everything else. And we have a slide of a little girl, a 6-year-old girl being arrested. That shows sort of the tenor of the times. Curtis tells me that they arrested a 5-year-old boy and they said, "What are you here for?" And he said, "Tweet him." He couldn't even pronounce freedom, but he was there. Well, Birmingham became the flashpoint. It was going to take something to really subpoena the conscience of the nation. It was going to take something, because they didn't have 24/7 news at that time. And so what happened was 4 little black girls ended up really becoming instrumental in the great change that came about. They lit a powder keg that would change the country. And Barbara is going to tell us about it.
Sunday, September 15th, 1962. It was Youth Day. It was their annual Youth Day at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Mamie Greer, superintendent of Sunday school, she ran into 4 young girls all dressed up in white, excitedly getting out of Bible class early. Mamie was sitting upstairs in Sunday school when she heard the explosion. Plaster and debris were everywhere. The large stone staircase on the outside, near where she had just seen the girls, had vanished. In the chaos, while working herself outdoors, Mamie met up with teacher Maxine McNair. Maxine grabbed an older man and asked the whereabouts of her daughter Denise. "She's dead, baby. I've got one of her shoes." The brother of 14-year-old Addie Mae Collins was screaming out that his sister was dead. It was true. 4 girls were to die that day in Birmingham, and the conscience of the nation was stirred as never before. Later that day, Chris McNair, Denise's father, still in shock, he left the hospital trying to focus on buying items for the funeral. Everywhere he went, white sales clerks burst into tears, saying that they had seen him on television. Chris knew the men that killed his daughter were white, but he was too numb to hate. Then, to end that strange day, a stream of dignified and overwrought white strangers knocked at his door. They were seemingly in as much pain as he was, trying to express condolences. Some of the cars had Confederate license plates. In the end, 8,000 people braved the military curfews to attend the joint funeral for 3 of the girls. Among the mourners were 800 Birmingham pastors of both races, a historic event for the city. It was the largest interracial gathering of clergy in the city's history. Denise McNair's grandfather's prophecy was being fulfilled. Maybe the girl's death will do something good.
Arrows proved in liberating strife. Well, that did stir the conscience of the nation. You know, we're unfortunately almost used to atrocities these days with 24/7 news, but that really made an impact. And it forced the Kennedy administration to finally address the issue. They were going to deal with it one-on-one, but now they realized this has gone too far. And so President Kennedy, in June of 1963, took the decisive step after the incident in Birmingham and brought the full power of the federal government into the civil rights movement. There have been other things. Little Rock 9, where 9 students tried to enroll in Little Rock, President Eisenhower had to send in the National Guard. This is going on in America. It's hard to believe, isn't it, for people looking back. So both Republicans and Democrats were forced to act. President Kennedy, in his usual eloquent way, crystallized the problem very well. And Steve Morrison will read us what he had to say.
My fellow Americans, good evening. 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. And this nation, for all its hopes and boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free. We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the scriptures and as clear as the American Constitution. The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities. Now the time has come for this nation to fulfill its promise. A great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive. Next week, I shall ask the Congress of the United States to act, to make a commitment it has not fully made in this century, to the proposition that race has no place in American life or law. I am therefore asking the Congress to enact legislation giving all Americans the right to be served in facilities which are open to the public: hotels, restaurants and theaters, retail stores, and similar establishments. This seems to me to be an elementary right. But legislation, I repeat, cannot solve this problem alone. It must be solved in the homes of every American in every community across our country. In that respect, I want to pay tribute to these citizens, North and South, who've been working in their communities to make life better for all. They are acting not out of a sense of legal duty, but out of a sense of human decency.
This young man's doing double duty, triple duty here today, running the sound system and microphones and everything, so we appreciate that. President Kennedy crystallized it all very well, didn't he? He took it right down to the individual homes. Ally building. It's nice to have allies when you're trying to change the world. And they can come in all shapes and sizes and ages. Even 75-year-old grandmothers. There's a lady from Boston you need to hear about. I'll tell you, well, Esther will tell you more about her, but she was part of the struggle going from Boston to Florida. And so let's see what happened.
Mary Peabody was among the bluest of Boston blue bloods. Her husband was a bishop of Massachusetts. Her son, Endicott Peabody, was governor. She was also cousin of Eleanor Roosevelt. Yet here she was in St. Augustine, Florida in 1964 with her good friend Esther Burgess, the wife of an African-American bishop. The ladies were met at the airport and escorted to nonviolent training sessions by Hosea Williams, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference representative in St. Augustine. Do you think the authorities will deny me the pleasure of lunch with my Negro friends? Mary Peabody asked Williams. Girl, these folks would deny Jesus. Williams replied. They arrived at Mount Zion Baptist Church for nonviolent workshops, where they were met by the chaplains of Smith College in Amherst. Nearly 100 students from Harvard and schools as far north as Quorum Teachers College in Maine, north and south together. After being predictably evicted from McCartney's lunch counter at the Slave Market restaurant, Williams asked the ladies if they would join the afternoon slate of jail volunteers. Predictably, the group were met at the lunch counter of the Ponce de Leon Motor Lodge by 3 police officers and 2 German Shepherd dogs. They allowed Mary Peabody to leave the jailed Esther Burgess, who sat in the back of a police car dressed in Boston finery while trembling with fear, facing a police dog. The civil rights strategists were concerned. They didn't like the public implications of a prominent white lady, Mary Peabody, escaping arrest while African American women were jailed. Mary checked with her son, the governor, back in Boston. He gave her his blessing. As the leaders for volunteers for the arrest, there stepped forward a small frame black seamstress, Georgia Reed, crippled with polio and strangely elated at the thought of sharing jail with a governor's mother. Later, Walter Cronkite offered Mary Peabody an appearance on CBS News if she could make bail time for a network appearance. No, said Ms. Peabody, I prefer to stay in jail with my friends.
Notice they were going to the Baptist church for nonviolent training session. It's a little bit of a different world back there. Allies come in all shapes and sizes, and that's why Dr. King was so wise when he said, this is not a victory for black Americans, it's a victory for all Americans. When we realize that, we look at our history a little bit differently, because I feel the civil rights movement got caught up in the anti-war movement that came later, and people can hardly distinguish the two. But basically, nonviolence was the leading light. Allies, well, he got a lot of them in August 1963 at the Washington Mall, 250,000 people, the biggest assembly in American history up to that time. And you've all been waiting for Darrell Brown to do his famous rendition of the I Have a Dream speech, which we should hear. But pay attention to the words, because you're going to hear some of the things on here about nonviolence that you wouldn't hear on the 6-second clips you get on the newscast. So here, doing his best to channel Dr. Martin Luther King as Mr. Darrell Brown.
We have all come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to change racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice ring out for all of God's children. We must forever conduct our struggle on the highest plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream one day that even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious races, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and that before the Lord be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith I go back to the mount with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the genuine discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom forever, knowing that we will be free one day. And I say to you today, my friends, let freedom ring. Let it ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the mighty Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. Let freedom, but not only there, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain in Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and every molehill in Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Amen.
15 years ago, Jarrell said to me at a deacon's meeting, "Mr. Earl, how long can we keep this up? We're all getting older." Well, he and I are 15 years older, and he's hanging in there pretty good. I think we have a slide on the legislation that came out of 1963, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, where discrimination was outlawed all across the United States. Now, is discrimination over? No. Of course not, but the mechanism is in place to begin to deal with it. Then we had the Voting Rights Act in 1965, which was very important if you want to have a voice in how your towns and cities are run. And also the Immigration Act, which was revised, because America wasn't always as inviting as some people think. And so the Immigration Act made it possible for me to have a wife who was American to move here without much ado. And I think that's a truism for a lot of us. Much work remains to be done, but did you catch the religious overtones of the message? Much more religious than you would expect. So here we are, folks. We are ready to sing another hymn that really puts a stamp on what these fine people have done today. And I think my good friend David will be here. We are one in the Spirit. We are one in the Lord. Didn't the presenters do a pretty good job today? They only had one practice, but they really brought it home. And I think these words will make us all, we can all sing it with much more earnesty. Let's all rise. We are one in the Spirit. We are one in the Lord. This is over. David and I are going on the road.